The car ride home from Kristen and Mark Bennett's house was silent, except for the occasional sound of Laura shifting in her seat. She had pressed herself against the passenger side door, her arms tightly crossed over her chest. The passing streetlights illuminated her profile, making her expression impossible to miss, furious. Not that I cared. Her silent rage was fuel to my own fire tonight. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, focusing on the road and trying to process the night's events without giving in to the urge to punch the dashboard. Kristen and Mark always hosted these polished gatherings at their estate in Naperville, Illinois, an upscale suburb just outside Chicago. They were known for their impeccable wine selection, gourmet hors d'oeuvres, and an assortment of Naperville's wealthiest looking for an excuse to unwind. But tonight wasn't just another one of their perfect parties. No, tonight had ripped apart the facade of suburban respectability and left me reeling. The evening had started innocently enough, cocktails on the patio, obligatory chatter about rising property values, and compliments on Kristen's magazine-worthy decor. I didn't love these events, but Laura thrived on them. She moved effortlessly between groups, laughing at bad jokes, trading gossip, and exchanging phone numbers for future coffee dates. I'd always let her shine, happy to stay in the background nursing a whiskey. But tonight something felt different. Maybe it was the way Kristen had leaned in conspiratorially when she mentioned spicing things up, or the sly glances exchanged between the other guests. At first, I ignored it, chalking it up to my paranoia. But then, I noticed the bowl. It sat in the middle of Kristen's pristine dining table, a sleek glass piece that looked like it belonged in an art gallery. At first, I assumed it was for car keys, some sort of makeshift valet system for guests who'd had too much to drink. But as the night progressed, I started noticing patterns. The women, perfectly manicured and dazzling in their designer dresses, would approach the bowl with subtle smiles, glancing around before casually dropping their keys in. The men, meanwhile, exchanged smirks, nudging each other like schoolboys sharing a dirty joke. My stomach tightened as the realization began to sink in. The whispered conversations I'd overheard, the nervous giggles, the air of anticipation, it all made sense now. This wasn't just a party. It was a swinger lottery. I watched as Laura floated through the room, laughing and chatting with Mark near the fireplace. She seemed entirely at ease, as if nothing about this evening was out of the ordinary. My mind reeled. Could she have known? I approached her, my heart pounding. "We need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her smile faltered for a split second. "Now? Jake, can it wait?" "No. Now." I grabbed her arm gently, but firmly, steering her toward the study. Mark gave us a knowing glance as we passed, his smug expression only deepening my anger. Once inside the dimly lit study, I closed the door behind us. "Do you know what's going on out there?" I demanded. Laura crossed her arms, her face unreadable. "Jake, don't make a scene." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You knew about this, didn't you?" Her expression barely changed, but her slight smirk gave her away. "Of course I knew. Everyone knows." "Everyone?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What do you mean, everyone knows?" "Jake," she said with a sigh, "it's not a big deal. It's just a little fun. People are bored. They're looking for excitement. Not everyone's happy sitting at home watching football reruns on a Saturday night." Her casual dismissal hit me like a slap. "So you thought I'd just be okay with this? You didn't even bother to tell me?" "Because I knew how you'd react," she said, rolling her eyes. "Look at you now, acting like the world is ending. God, you're such a prude." I took a step back, the weight of her betrayal crashing down on me. "You wanted me to what? Pick someone else's wife out of a bowl like some cheap raffle? Is this what our marriage has come to?" "Jake, it's just a game," she said, exasperated. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." I stared at her, barely recognizing the woman standing in front of me. The woman I married, the woman I thought I knew, was defending this madness. The crack in our marriage had gone from invisible to a gaping canyon in a matter of hours. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice low and firm. "We're leaving now. If you want to stay, if this so-called game is more important to you than our marriage, don't bother coming home." Her eyes narrowed, but I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross her face. "Fine," she said after a long pause. Let's go. I didn't wait for Laura to follow me. I marched out of the study, past the cluster of partygoers laughing and chatting as if nothing was amiss, and straight to the dining room table. My heart raced as I stood over the glass bowl, my reflection distorted by its curved surface. Without hesitation, I plunged my hand in and pulled out a random set of keys. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me, and the weight of their stares pressed down like a lead blanket. For the record, I said, holding the keys high like a trophy, I think this is disgusting. My marriage is not a game, and if any of you think it is, you're pathetic. I tossed the keys back into the bowl with a sharp clink and turned on my heel, storming toward the front door. I didn't bother looking back to see if Laura was following me. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside, but it did little to soothe the fury boiling inside me. The car ride home was a blur of silence and tension. Laura sat rigid in the passenger seat, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her profile was illuminated by the dim glow of passing streetlights, and I could feel the anger radiating off her. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as I replayed the evening in my head, the whispers, the smirks, her casual betrayal. When we pulled into the driveway, she exploded. "You embarrassed me," she shouted, slamming the car door before I even had a chance to turn off the engine. "You humiliated me in front of everyone, Jake. Everyone." I stepped out of the car slowly, taking my time as I followed her toward the house. "You mean your little group of swingers?" I shot back, my voice cold. "Forgive me if I'm not concerned about their feelings." She whirled around to face me, her eyes blazing. "They are our friends. They were your friends." I corrected, my voice rising. "I didn't sign up to swap spouses with them." She scoffed, throwing her hands in the air. "You're so dramatic. It wasn't even that serious. Nobody's forcing anyone to do anything. It's just an option." "An option?" I repeated, incredulous. "An option to cheat on your husband and call it a party game? To toss aside 21 years of marriage because you're bored? Don't you dare," she hissed, pointing a finger at me. "Don't you stand there and act like you're some perfect saint, Jake. You're so busy playing the martyr, you can't even see how suffocating you've become. You think we're happy? You think this," she gestured wildly toward the house. "This suburban prison is enough?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Suburban prison. That's how she saw our life together. The home we built, the family we nurtured, the memories we created. It was all meaningless to her. "You're right," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "I don't think this is enough. Not if it means standing in this kitchen, watching the woman I married defend something so vile." She rolled her eyes and turned toward the stairs. "I'm not doing this with you tonight." "Oh, you're not running away from this," I said, following her. "You're going to make a choice, right here, right now." She stopped at the base of the stairs, her back still to me. "You can't control me, Jake. Not anymore." Her words hung in the air as she ascended the stairs, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. The house, once filled with the laughter of our children and the warmth of family dinners, now felt cold and empty. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, a steaming mug of coffee in front of me, staring blankly at the grain of the wood. 21 years of marriage were etched into that table, scratches from the kids' homework, stains from spilled wine, memories of late-night conversations. And now it felt like all of it was slipping away. I hadn't slept. Not really. After Laura stormed upstairs, I stayed awake, pacing the living room and replaying the night in my head. Her words echoed in my mind, sharp and unrelenting. Suburban prison. Bored. Suffocating. Her footsteps broke the silence. She entered the kitchen like nothing had happened. Her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, wearing leggings and an oversized sweatshirt. She opened the fridge, rummaging around like it was just another Saturday morning. "Morning," she said casually, not even glancing at me. I stared at her, waiting for some acknowledgement of last night. But there was nothing, just the sound of orange juice pouring into a glass. "Morning," I repeated, my voice sharp. "That's all you've got to say?" She sighed, leaning against the counter. "What do you want me to say, Jake? You made it pretty clear where you stand." "I want to know where you stand," I said, my voice rising. "I gave you a choice, Laura. You walked away. So what does that mean? Are you staying? Or are you going back to your little key party? Her eyes narrowed. You don't get to demand answers from me like this. I'm your husband, I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. I deserve answers. She glared at me, setting the glass down with a loud clink. You're impossible. You know that. You act like everything is black and white, like there's no room for nuance or growth. I let out a bitter laugh. Growth? Is that what you're calling this? Destroying our marriage is your idea of growth. Her face twisted with anger, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence of what used to be our home. By the time Laura disappeared upstairs, I was done waiting for answers. The weight of her betrayal and her dismissive attitude pushed me past the point of patience. She didn't think I deserved respect. Fine. I would take action. I stepped outside, letting the cool morning air hit my face as I sat on the porch steps. My mind raced with plans. The life we built wasn't perfect, but I had worked too hard to let her selfishness tear it apart. If Laura wanted to burn everything to the ground, she would face the consequences. That afternoon, I sat in the sleek downtown office of Brian Cooper, my old friend turned high-powered divorce attorney. The view of Naperville's bustling streets outside seemed almost ironic given the unraveling chaos of my personal life. Brian listened intently as I recounted the events of the past few days, the party, Laura's betrayal, and her refusal to acknowledge the damage she'd caused. When I finished, he let out a low whistle and leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. Swinger parties? He said, shaking his head. That's a new one. Even for Naperville. It's not funny, I snapped. Relax, Jake, he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. I'm not making light of it. This is serious, and you're right to come to me now. The sooner we get ahead of this, the better. He grabbed a legal pad and began jotting down notes. Here's the plan. First, we file for divorce. With the evidence of her infidelity, we'll have a strong case for asset division and custody. The courts usually favor the mother. But if we can prove her actions are harmful or destabilizing, we'll have a shot at primary custody for you. I won't let her drag the kids into this mess, I said firmly. I'll do whatever it takes. Good. Now I'll need all the evidence you've got. Texts, emails, receipts. I'll also call in a few favors with my PI. If Laura's been meeting up with her new friends, we'll find the proof. Frank Carter's already on it, I said. He's thorough. Brian raised an eyebrow. Smart move. Let him die. Once we've got everything, we'll serve her the papers. She doesn't need to know we're filing until it's too late for her to make any counter moves. I nodded, feeling a flicker of relief. For the first time in days, I had a plan. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was taking control. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Frank called me on Thursday with his findings. Got what you need, he said gruffly. Emails, text messages, and photos. She and David have been meeting up at the Hilton downtown. Not exactly discreet. Hearing the confirmation hit like a gut punch. Even though I'd suspected it, knowing the truth made it harder to ignore the pain. But I swallowed my pride and stayed focused. Send everything to Brian, I said. Make sure it's airtight. You got it, Frank replied. But there's something else you should know. What? I asked, bracing myself. There's chatter about a bigger party at the Bennett's place next weekend. Sounds like they're doubling down despite the fallout from your little speech. Might be worth keeping an eye on. I gritted my teeth. Of course they were. People like Kristen and Mark didn't care about consequences. They thrived on the thrill of pushing boundaries. But if they thought they could keep their dirty secrets hidden, they were wrong. That weekend, while Laura was conveniently out with friends, I drove by the Bennett's house. Their driveway was packed with cars, and the soft glow of their porch lights spilled into the quiet suburban street. I parked a few blocks away and watched from a distance, my jaw tightening as couples filtered into the house, laughing and chatting like they were attending a charity gala. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Frank had already arranged for someone to gather evidence. Instead, I sat in the car, imagining the fallout that was about to rain down on them. By the end of the week, Kristen and Mark's little kingdom of secrets would be front-page news. On Monday, Brian called with an update. It's done, he said. The divorce papers will be delivered tomorrow. And by the way, The Naperville Times is running a piece on the Bennett's extracurricular activities. My journalist friend couldn't resist. Good, I said, my voice cold. They deserve it. Brian chuckled. You're playing this smart, Jake. Keep your head down and let the storm pass. By the time the dust settles, you'll come out on top. I thanked him and hung up, staring at the stack of photos and documents Frank had sent over. Every text Laura had exchanged with David, every hotel receipt, every email, they were all there, laid out like evidence in a courtroom drama. It wasn't just about proving her guilt anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. The papers were delivered the next day, hand-delivered to Laura while she was out having lunch with Kristen. According to Frank, her reaction was priceless. Shock, disbelief, and finally, quiet fury. When she came home that night, she slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. Jake! She yelled, storming into the living room where I was sitting with the kids. Can I talk to you? I stood, keeping my voice calm. Why don't you kids head upstairs? I said gently. They didn't need to see this. Once they were gone, Laura threw the papers onto the coffee table. What the hell is this? It's a divorce. I said simply, crossing my arms. You're seriously doing this? Over one fight, she snapped. This isn't about one fight, Laura, I said, my tone firm. This is about you lying to me, betraying me, and throwing away 21 years of marriage for him. Her face flushed with anger. It's not like that. Oh, really? I interrupted, tossing the stack of evidence onto the table. Then what is it? Because these texts and emails tell a different story. Laura's eyes widened as she looked at the stack of papers on the table. Her face drained of color, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But then her expression hardened, and the defiance I'd grown used to resurfaced. I didn't want it to come to this, she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. But you're leaving me no choice. No, Laura, I said, stepping closer, my voice low and steady. You gave me no choice. You lied to me, you betrayed me, and now you have to live with the consequences. Her jaw tightened, and she crossed her arms over her chest. Do you even understand what you're doing? This is going to ruin everything for the kids, for us. For the kids? I repeated, my voice rising. Don't you dare try to use them to justify what you've done. You were the one sneaking around, going to hotels with David, not me. It wasn't sneaking, she shot back. I never meant to hurt you, Jake. But you did, I said, my voice breaking. You hurt me, and you hurt this family. And now, I'm done pretending that everything can go back to the way it was. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of 21 years of marriage hanging between us like a heavy fog. Finally, she broke the silence. So, that's it? She said, her voice hollow. You're just giving up. I'm not giving up, I said firmly. I'm moving on. And you should too. The fallout was swift and brutal. By the end of the week, the Naperville Times published an expose on the Bennett parties, complete with anonymous testimonies and damning details. The article went viral, spreading through the city's tight-knit suburban circles like wildfire. Kristen and Mark found themselves at the center of a scandal they couldn't escape. Friendships crumbled, reputations were destroyed, and even businesses associated with the Bennetts faced backlash. Laura, of course, wasn't spared. Her name was never mentioned in the article, but the whispers and side glances at the grocery store made it clear she was part of the fallout. She confronted me a few days after the story broke. Was this you? She demanded, standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed. I looked at her calmly. I didn't write the article, if that's what you're asking. But you made it happen, she accused, her voice shaking. You gave them the information. I didn't deny it. People deserve to know the truth, Laura. If you and your friends didn't want this getting out, you shouldn't have done it in the first place. Her face flushed with anger, but she didn't have a response. Instead, she stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. The divorce was finalized within months. The evidence of her infidelity and the public scandal left her with little leverage. I was awarded primary custody of the kids, the house, and most of our savings. Laura moved into a modest apartment on the other side of town, far from the life we'd built together. She reached out occasionally about the kids, but our conversations were strictly transactional. The warmth, the familiarity, everything that made us was gone. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The kids and I found a new rhythm, one that didn't involve Laura's constant need for excitement or her sharp criticisms. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the loneliness crept in, when I found myself staring at old photos and wondering how it had all fallen apart. But those moments were fleeting. The longer I lived without her, the more I realized how much of myself I'd lost trying to keep her happy. One Saturday afternoon, I took the kids to a local park. The air was crisp, the sun warm against the autumn chill. Sophie chased a soccer ball across the grass, while Hannah sat on a bench with a book. Jake Jr., ever the daredevil, was attempting to climb the tallest tree he could find. "Need a hand, buddy?" I called, walking over as he stretched for the next branch. He looked down at me, grinning. "I got it, Dad." I laughed, stepping back to let him try. It was in that moment, watching him cling to the tree with pure determination, that I realized how far we'd come. Our family might have been fractured, but we weren't broken. We were stronger than that. As I stood there, soaking in the simple joy of the moment, a woman approached me. She looked to be around my age, with a warm smile and kind, brown eyes. Her blonde hair was tied back in a loose braid, and she carried an air of effortless calm. "Hi," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Rachel. My son's playing with your daughter over there." She nodded toward the soccer field, where Sophie and a boy about her age were kicking the ball back and forth. "Jake," I said, shaking her hand. "Nice to meet you." We talked for a while, trading stories about our kids and laughing about the challenges of parenting. Her presence was light, easy, so different from the tension that had defined my relationship with Laura in recent years. When Rachel smiled, it felt genuine, not calculated. As she turned to leave, she glanced back. "Maybe we'll see you here again next weekend." "Maybe," I said, smiling back. That evening, as I sat at the kitchen table helping Sophie with her math homework, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. Life hadn't turned out the way I planned, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. For the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to what came next. Life didn't end with Laura. It started over. And for me and the kids, that was more than enough.